Chapter 10. The reaction of the physical. As we have stated in our foreword, there is a constant action and reaction between the mental states and the physical conditions. In this book, from the nature of our subject, we have started with the phase of the mental state and worked from that point to the consideration of the physical condition. In the same way, many physiologists start from the phase of the physical condition and work up to the mental state. But, starting from either phase, the candid investigator must admit that there is an endless chain of action and reaction between mind and body, between body and mind. This action and reaction work along the lines of building up and tearing down. For instance, if a person's mental state is positive, optimistic, cheerful, and uplifting, the body will respond, and the physical conditions will improve. The physical conditions, thus improving, will react upon the mental states, giving them a clearness and strength greater than previously manifested. The improved mental state again acts upon the physical conditions, further improving the latter. And so on, an endless chain of cause and effect, each effect becoming a cause for a subsequent effect, and each cause arising from a preceding effect. Likewise, a depressed, harmful mental state will act upon the physical conditions, which in turn will react upon the mental states and so on, in an endless chain of destructive cause and effect. It is a striking illustration of the old biblical statement, "To him who hath shall be given, to him who hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath." In improving either the mental state or the physical condition, one gives an uplift to the whole process of action and reaction. At the same time, whatever adversely affects either the mental state or physical condition starts into operation, a depressing and destructive process of action and reaction. The ideal to be aimed at is, of course, a healthy mind and a healthy body, and the two are so closely related that what affects one, favorably or unfavorably, is sure to react upon the other. Just as the influence of mental states over physical conditions has been shown to operate by means of the sympathetic nervous system, controlled by the subconscious mind, the influence of physical conditions over mental states may be explained in physiological terms. In order to understand the reaction of the body to the mind, we have to recall the fact that the subconscious mind is the builder and preserver of the very brain cells that the conscious mind uses in manifesting thought. Also, the entire nervous system, both cerebral and spinal, as well as sympathetic, is really under the control of the subconscious mind so far as growth and nourishment are concerned. The very brain and nerve centers in and through which manifested thought, feeling, emotion, and will are nourished by the sympathetic system and are hurt by anything affecting the latter. The sympathetic system joins all parts of the organism so closely together that trouble in one part is reflected in other parts. Just as depressing thoughts will cause the organs to function improperly, so will the improper functioning of an organ tend to produce depressing thoughts. Herbert A. Parkin, M.D., states the action and reaction of mind and body well, as follows: "A tree is much like a human being. Give it plenty of fresh air, water, and rich soil, and it will flourish. In the same degree to which it is deprived, this it wilt, and the first part of the tree to wilt when the nutrition becomes imperfect is the top. This is owing to the force of gravity, the blood of the tree, and the sap, having to overcome this force of nature when nourishing the highest leaves. The blood of man is also affected by this same force, and the moment a man's circulation begins to run down, owing to stinted nutrition, we find that the first symptoms of trouble appear in the head. The brain fails to receive its accustomed amount of blood, such troubles as impaired memory, inability to concentrate attention, sleeplessness, nervousness, irritableness, the blues, and slight headaches develop, and the impulses sent all over the body becoming feebler, the various organs do not perform their functions as satisfactorily as usual. The impulses to the stomach and bowels become weaker and weaker, and dyspepsia, constipation, or both soon follow. As soon as these, the main organs of nutrition, are out of order, nutrition fails rapidly, and more head symptoms develop. Every impulse of the muscular system leaves the brain, and the strength of these impulses depends upon the nutrition of the brain centers controlling the various groups. As the nutrition to these centers declines, the whole muscular system, including the muscles of the bowels, becomes weaker and the patient complains that he exhausts easily. The impulses for elimination become weaker, waste products remain in circulation, and any of the evils that naturally follow this state of affairs, such as rheumatism, sick headache, biliousness, etc., are likely to develop. The centers of the special senses feel the lessening of the vital fluid, and such troubles as impaired vision, impaired hearing, loss of appetite, Sense of taste and inability to detect odors quickly soon follow. The sense of touch becomes more acute, which is why one in poor health becomes hypersensitive. Lowered circulation in the mucous membrane of the throat and nose is often the cause of nasal catarrh appearing on the scene as an early symptom. Thus, the physical conditions, perhaps originally caused by the depressing mental states, have brought about a state of affairs in which the brain is imperfectly nourished and consequently cannot think properly. The liver is out of order, the spirits are depressed, the brain is imperfectly nourished, the attention and will are weakened, and the patient finds it hard to use his mind to influence his bodily conditions. The bowels are not moving properly, the waste products poison the circulation, and the brain cannot think clearly. In fact, the whole physical system is often so disturbed that a condition known as nervous prostration sets in which it is practically impossible for the patient to hold the mental states that will improve the physical conditions. In these cases, outside help is generally necessary unless in cases where a sudden shock or an urgent necessity arouses the latent mental forces of the individual, and he asserts the power that is in him and begins to reverse the chain of cause and effect and start on the upward climb. The following additional quotation from Dr. Parkin gives us a vivid insight into the effect upon the mental states of abnormal physical conditions. Dr. Parkin says, "No organ of the body can perform its functions properly when the amount of blood supplied to it is insufficient, and we find, when the blood supply to the brain is not up to the normal standard, that brain functions are interfered with to a degree corresponding to the reduction in the circulation. Since the amount of blood normally supplied to the brain is lessened in nervous prostration, we find that the memory fails, and the ability to concentrate attention disappears. The reasoning power becomes weakened, and the steadiest mind commences to vacillate. Fears and hallucinations of every description may fill the mind of a patient at this stage, and every impression he receives is likely to be greatly distorted or misconstrued. Melancholia, with a constant fear of impending danger, is often present. In fact, the brain seems to lose even the power to control its functions, and the mind becomes active day and night. The reduction of the nutrition to the brain lessens the activity of all the cerebral centers, and digestion becomes markedly impaired, thereby weakening the organ itself upon which the supply of vital force depends. The physiologist is able to furnish a great variety of illustrations of the effect of physical conditions on mental states. He shows that many cases of mental trouble are due to eye strain and other muscular disturbances, and that serious mental complaints sometimes arise by reason of physical lesions. The very terms used to designate certain abnormal mental states show the relation. For instance, melancholia, which is derived from the Greek words meaning black bile, and hysteria, which is derived from the Greek word meaning the womb or uterus. Everyone knows the mental states produced by a sluggish liver, dyspepsia, or constipation. We all know the difference between our mental capacity for thinking when we are tired and that accompanying a refreshed physical condition. No man, whatever his philosophy, can truthfully claim to be able to maintain a placid, even disposition and a perfectly controlled temper when he is suffering from a boil on the back of his neck. And all know that after indulging in the midnight Welsh rarebit, one is apt to dream of his grandmother's ghost or see dream elephants with wings. All know the delirium produced by overindulgence in liquor and the hallucinations that accompany fever. The effects of drugs, tobacco, and alcohol upon the mental states are well known. Philip drunk is a very different mentality from Philip sober. The mental states accompanying particular diseases are well known to physicians. One disease predisposes the sufferer to gloominess, while another will induce a state of feverish hilarity. Some leading authorities now hold that many cases of insanity are really due to abnormal conditions of the blood rather than to any diseased condition of the brain. One of the most marked instances of the action and reaction of the mental states and physical conditions is met with in the activities of the sexual organism. Psychologists very properly hold that sexual excesses and abnormalities are largely due to improper thinking, that is, by allowing the attention and interest to dwell too strongly and continuously upon subjects connected with the activities of that part of the physical system. Mental treatment along the lines of suggestive therapeutics has resulted in curing many persons of troubles of this sort. But, note the correlated fact, excess and abnormalities of the kind mentioned almost invariably react upon the mentality of the person indulging in them, and softening of the brain, paralysis, or imbecility have often arisen directly from these physical abuses. Any sane treatment of these troubles must take into consideration both body and mind. In the same way, it is a fact that just as certain mental states, notably those of fear, worry, grief, jealousy, etc., will injuriously affect the organs of digestion and assimilation, so will imperfect functioning of these organs tend to produce depressing mental states similar to those just mentioned. Many instances of strange correspondences are met within the study of physiological psychology or psychological physiology. In order to more fully appreciate the relation between the body and the mind, let us read the following lines from Professor Halleck. Marvelous as are the mind's achievements, we must note that it is as completely dependent upon the nervous system as is a plant upon sun, rain, and air. Suppose a child of intelligent parents were ushered into the world without a nerve leading from his otherwise perfect brain to any portion of his body, with no optic nerve to transmit the glorious sensations from the eye, no auditory nerve to conduct the vibrations of the mother's voice, no tactile nerves to convey the touch of a hand, no olfactory nerve to rouse the brain with the delicate aroma from the orchards and the wildflowers in spring, no gustatory, thermal or muscular nerves. Could such a child live, as the years rolled on, the books of Shakespeare and of Milton? They would be opened in vain before the child's eyes. The wisest men might talk to him with utmost eloquence, all to no purpose. Nature could not whisper one of her inspiring truths into his deaf ear, could not light up that dark mind with a picture of the rainbow or of a human face. No matter how perfect might be the child's brain and his inherited capacity for mental activities, his faculties would remain for this life shrouded in Egyptian darkness. Perception could give memory nothing to retain, and thought could not weave her matchless fabrics without materials. The very feelings or emotions themselves are so closely related to the accompanying physical expressions that it is difficult to distinguish between cause and effect or, indeed, to state positively which really is the cause of the other. Professor William James, in some of his works, strongly indicates this close relation, for instance, when he says, the feeling, in the coarser emotions, results from the bodily expression. My theory is that the bodily changes directly follow the perception of the exciting fact and that our feeling of the same changes as they occur is the emotion. Particular perceptions certainly do produce widespread bodily effects by a sort of immediate physical influence, antecedent to the arousal of an emotion or emotional idea. Every one of the bodily changes, whatsoever it may be, is felt, acutely or obscurely, the moment it occurs. If we fancy some strong emotion, and then try to abstract from our consciousness of it all the feelings of its bodily symptoms, we have nothing left behind. A disembodied human emotion is a sheer nonentity. I do not say that it is a contradiction in the nature of things or that pure spirits are necessarily condemned to cold intellectual lives, but I say that for us, emotion disassociated from all bodily feelings is inconceivable. The more closely I scrutinize my states, the more persuaded I become that whatever coarse affections and passions I have are in very truth constituted by and made up of those bodily changes that we ordinarily call their expression or consequence. But our emotions must always be inwardly what they are, whatever may be the physiological ground of their apparition. Suppose they are deep, pure, worthy, spiritual facts on any conceivable theory of their physiological source. In that case, they remain no less deep, more spiritual, and worthy of regard in this present sensational theory. A deeper consideration of the relationship between mind and body would necessitate our invading the field of metaphysical speculation, which we have expressed our intention to avoid doing. Enough for the purposes of our present consideration is the recognition that each individual is possessed of a mind and a material body, that these two phases or aspects of himself are closely related by an infinite variety of ties and filaments, that these two phases of his being act and react upon each other constantly and continuously, that in all considerations of the question of either mental or physical well-being or both, that both of these phases of being must be considered, that any system of therapeutics which ignores either of these phases, is necessarily one-sided and incomplete, and that, while, for convenience and clearness of specialized thinking, we may consider the mind and the body as separate and independent of each other, yet, we must, in the end, recognize their interdependence, mutual relation, action, and reaction. Thus, the new psychology recognizes the importance of the body, while the new physiology recognizes the importance of the mind. In the end, we feel that both physiology and psychology must be recognized as being but two different phases of one great science, the science of life.